Coming up in today's newscast, 12 women now stand together in accusations of sexual assault against Prime Minister Netanyahu's foreign media spokesperson, David Keyes. Today marks the 25th anniversary since the 1993 Oslo Accords were signed, and we take a look at the top 5 traditions to observe over the upcoming Yom Kippur holiday. Mere days after being accused of sexual assault by 2 American women, David Keyes, who serves as the spokesman to Prime Minister Netanyahu, is now facing 10 more accounts of alleged sexual misconduct. Keyes himself continues to unambiguously deny the allegations, though, allegations which seem to quickly be mounting. At this time, a total of 12 women have come forward with various stories of sexual misconduct. The majority of alleged incidents appear to have taken place between 2012 and 2016, though some accounts are much older and date back to Keyes' time in the United States shortly after graduating from the University of California. These allegations first surfaced back in 2016 when Julia Salazar, who is currently running for the New York State Senate, published a private Facebook post documenting the alleged assault. Israeli media published the article while leaving her name anonymous, but just days ago, Salazar went public with her claims ahead of a media story that sought to expose her as a victim of sexual assault prior to Senate elections this week. Keyes quickly denied the allegations, pointing to Salazar's history of lying about her own credentials and Jewish history. But a few hours later, Wall Street Journal reporter Shandi Race corroborated Salazar's account by alleging her own experiences with Keyes, accusing him of also sexually assaulting her during an unspecified encounter. Then, over the last 36 hours, 10 more women, many of whom are said to have worked closely with Keyes for years, have also come forward anonymously to document what they say is a long history of sexual misconduct. At least one other woman at this time has accused Keyes of aggressively forcing himself on her in 2012 in his New York apartment. And that same woman apparently received an apology letter from Keyes nearly a year later, in which he allegedly concedes to being, quote, less than gentlemanly, end quote, during their encounter. Other anonymous sources and co-workers say that Keyes made women uncomfortable in the office, was purposefully kept away from female interns, and would draw hearts around the names of women in the office that he especially liked. Needless to say, these are all very serious allegations, but Keyes, as recently as yesterday, told Israeli media, quote, all of the accusations are deeply misleading and many of them are categorically false, end quote. At this time, no criminal charges have been filed beyond these allegations. With the fate of the JCPOA nuclear deal with Iran still in limbo, all sides are bracing for every possible outcome. Iran's economy has undoubtedly taken a massive hit following Trump's withdrawal from the deal and the resuming of the United States sanctions. And the regime now faces the choice of whether to bow to Trump's demands to halt its nuclear development full stop, or else plunge deeper into economic crisis. At this time, Tehran seems to be teetering on either option. The regime's parliament speaker has just stated that Iran possesses some 3,000 to 4,000 active centrifuges capable of fast-capacity uranium enrichment. If true, this number would actually be well below the estimated 9,000 that the regime held prior to entering the landmark JCPOA nuclear deal in 2015. When it comes to this technology, however, quantity is usually not a way to gauge just how quickly a nuclear warhead could come together. Under the current terms of the deal, Iran is allegedly only in possession of older IR-1 centrifuges, which develop uranium relatively slowly. Rumor is, however, that the regime is eyeing construction plans for advanced IR-2, 4, and 6 models, which could potentially ramp up its enrichment capacity 5-fold. The United Nations' top nuclear watchdog has continued to verify Iran's compliance with the terms stipulated in the JCPOA, of which Russia, China, and the EU are still in accord. Israeli leaders, however, aren't buying it. Israel's Intelligence and Transportation Minister Israel Katz has gone so far as to threaten a harsh military response if Iran doesn't halt its efforts to develop uranium for the purposes of a nuclear war. According to Katz, Iran faces a, quote, direct threat from the United States and its allies, end quote, if the regime pushes forward with its current plans. At this point, many believe a military confrontation will inevitably be the final endgame here, no matter what. Returning now to the studio with more on Iran and the future of the region is Middle East expert and former Arab Affairs advisor of the Southern Command, Colonel Dr. Reuven Berko. Colonel, thank you so much for coming back in.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, so my first question is, where do you see this conflict a month from now, a year from now?
It's obviously the prediction in Judaism is something that has been given to idiots, to predict what's going to be in a year from now. But we can watch and follow the process. The process is that the Iranians are insisting on having this program. They won't stop it. And they are doing on the ground a lot of efforts in the sides of a Yemen conflict against Saudi Arabia, and in completing their nexus towards Beirut, towards to create a direct line between Tehran and Beirut through Iraq and through Syria. So this is something that will be damaged as more as the sanctions increasing. And I believe that the European, till now, didn't understand, they have no interest to understand the influence of the American steps because they have beneficial interests beyond keeping on this connection with Iran. By the time that the sanctions are doing the opposite, they are decreasing the ability of Iran to support terrorist organizations such as Hamas, such as Hezbollah, such as the Houthis in the area of Yemen. And I predict, if I am allowed to do so, that these abilities will be decreased. And parallel to this, the public in Iran, those who are shouting no supply to Gaza, supply to Iranian people, will keep on tension, and this will risk the authorities, the Ayatollah regime in Iran. So in any case, I believe that the sanctions have a very good influence on the security of the area. And by the time, the more and more the sanctions are affecting the regime in Iran, we will see desperate or even more aggressive approach by the Iranian on the Gulf and the area of Saudi Arabia, the involvement in the matters of the Gulf states, etc. We will see a more daring steps towards Israel in the northern borders to gain the much that they can in the given time.
So you see kind of a double-headed action here. You see both the sanctions working in such a way where Iran will be crippled economically and will therefore kind of have to stop their funding for Houthi rebels, for Gaza.
They will decrease it. They will try to keep on doing this.
And then at the same time, you see them behaving like kind of a cornered animal and attacking and becoming more aggressive?
I believe that they will never stop planning and doing for developing their abilities on missiles and nuclear weapons. This is an agenda that those who tried in the past to appease Iranians, such as the Obama, at Obama time, they did on the contrary, they even contributed to the Iranian efforts by giving them the money that has been so long time in the American banks. So they actually caused a lot of damage to the area by contributing these amounts of money. And now I believe that the efforts of missiles, the efforts of nuclear weapons will keep on doing whatever will be, even on the behalf of the Iranian people. Let them starve as far as these programs are concerned. But I believe that in the long run, it will influence for the good in what concerns the ability of Iranian regime to support terrorist activities here in the area. But I cannot illude myself. An Islamic aggressive agenda, such as Sunni aggressive or Shia aggressive, cannot be changed by appeasement.
All right. Well, Colonel Dr. Berko, thank you so much for coming back in and sharing your insights.
Thank you.
All right. Tensions are reaching a fever pitch at the Bedouin village of Khan al-Ahmar. Israel's High Court upheld a ruling earlier this month that the village had been illegally built in contested territory in the West Bank and would therefore be demolished in the coming days. Now, ahead of that slated demolition, Israeli security teams have just destroyed 5 trailers set up on the outskirts of the village by Palestinian protesters, a sign that the full order may soon be imminent.
The small Bedouin village of Khan al-Ahmar has a population of less than 200 people, but the tiny community has already sparked headlines all over the world. The fate of the village has been mired in a fierce legal battle for many years now. Its inhabitants are said to originally be Bedouins from Israel's Negev, who were removed by the Israeli government sometime in the 1950s and relocated to the West Bank just outside of Jerusalem. The families claim that with nowhere to go and no instructions, they had no choice but to construct their own homes, schools, and prayer spaces using tents and trash. But now, in a landmark ruling, the High Court has deemed these structures to be illegal, slating the entire village for demolition. Mere days ago, the Palestinians took this issue to the international courts, calling the move a war crime. For now, it remains to be seen if the ICC will actually open an investigation into this case. What is clear, though, is that this small village has quickly captured the world's attention as a difficult and complex metaphor for the entire Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But the IDF's removal of protesters from the area, done under the cover of night, is a big sign that the government intends to raze this village to the ground, regardless of international interests. Many believe the demolition will take place within the coming days, if not hours.
Today marks the day that 25 years ago, Israeli and Palestinian leaders convened at the White House for an unprecedented occasion, the signing of the Oslo Accords. Some saw Oslo as a major step backwards for peace, and others as an incredible ray of hope for it. But regardless of where you fall on the spectrum, the signing of Oslo was undoubtedly one of the most unforgettable occasions of the 20th century. And LTV's Brett Allen Smith is here with a brief look back at Oslo.
Hi, thanks, Aaron. So, as we know, the Oslo Accords, along with everything that led up to them and followed them, is a pretty significant cornerstone of world history. And 25 years later, that legacy is still fiercely debated in both Israeli and Palestinian societies. Because for some, those accords were seen as betrayals from both sides by leaders who compromised too much for the other. And others recall that time as maybe the most hopeful either society had ever felt that there could be a real lasting peace. But history is kind of an ethereal poetry to itself sometimes because, of course, today, almost 25 years later, instead of Israeli and Palestinian leaders meeting at the White House to sign an accord, the current White House has just closed the PLO's offices and ejected them from D.C. So history really comes full circle sometimes.
Yeah, well, one of the more interesting things about Oslo is, of course, how it all came together in the first place. I understand that there's actually a new documentary premiering on HBO today about that.
Yeah, correct. So that film's called The Oslo Diaries. It's an Israeli film directed by Mo Laushi and Daniel Sivan. It actually premiered back at Sundance in January and was immediately snatched up by HBO for a pretty big deal. So the doc isn't political, it's more of an inside look at how those secret talks physically came together back in the 90s, featuring all kinds of rare, never before seen footage from the period. And much of the material actually comes from diaries of people who were in the room on all sides of those negotiations, American, Israeli, Palestinian, whatever, stuff that's never been seen before. So notably, it also features the final on-screen interview with Shimon Peres, which I think is pretty special. And I think 2 days after he shot that interview, he was rushed to the hospital where, of course, he would pass away sometime later. Peres was, of course, instrumental to the negotiation and signing of the Oslo Accords. He had very much a front row seat. So I think that his insight in that final interview is probably just about as intimate and as inside a look as you can get about Oslo.
I mean, it sounds incredible, very interesting. And even though Israel is becoming more and more famous for its series on Netflix, like Fauda and Mossad 101, I think the country makes some of the most interesting and complex documentaries out there too. And this one sounds really fascinating. But on that note, thanks for the story, Brett.
Of course.
Alas, some devastating news today for Israeli shoppers. As quickly as it began, Amazon has officially ended its offer for free shipping to Israel on orders of $75 or more. The last month and a half of free shipping has served as a kind of pilot program to Amazon to test the Israeli market. And needless to say, Israelis are probably hoping right about now that this pilot was a success and that more Amazon was on the way.
The shipping giant announced its deal for free shipping on orders in excess of $75 just 6 weeks ago, to the delight of Israelis all over the country. And while Amazon does ship some of its warehouse items to the Holy Land, most external clients who use Amazon as a marketplace still don't ship at all. Still, the promise of fast and guaranteed delivery from one of the biggest digital marketplaces on Earth was quite a tease, especially for a country renowned for its online shopping. Earlier this year, Target launched a similar free shipping for Israelis sending goods to the Jewish state. But that offer lasted only very briefly when the demand far exceeded the supply, forcing Target to take down the offer and cancel many of its orders. As for Amazon, the good news for now is that the company is definitely interested in expanding services to Israel. Word has it that Amazon headhunters have actually been scouting in Israel for new warehouse locations, which could mean even faster delivery and an even larger market to choose from. And that's good, since Amazon orders from Israel surged following this apparent short-lived offer for free shipping. And by the way, that $75 limit was purposefully placed right at the cutoff for customs taxes. So clearly Israelis are willing to pay a bit more for taxes in exchange for the free shipping on whatever it is that they're ordering. And fingers crossed, Amazon sees this potential and sets up shop in the Holy Land very soon.
There are roughly 1.8 million Israelis living below the poverty line, roughly 850,000 of which are children. Many people donate money, food, and clothing, and other necessities, but the cycle of poverty in the country continues strong. So how do we break the wheel? Well, Gabi Vaknin, the operations manager at Pitchon Lev, is here to answer that very question. Gabi, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you, and good evening.
Thank you. So, what are the primary causes of homelessness, of entering poverty in Israel? Because I know, 30 years ago, Israelis boasted zero homelessness and poverty.
Yeah, the poverty is, all the time we have poverty in Israel. Every country has poverty.
Of course.
Poverty. And the reason for poverty in Israel is mostly the government. The government don't care about the poverty people and the needs in Israel. And this causes the more than 1.8 million people below the poverty line.
So what does Pitchon Lev do to kind of address this?
Pitchon Lev working in three dimensions. In the short term, we are giving humanitarian assistance by giving them a food basket, clothes, and giving them, telling all the time that Israel is a startup nation. But we have 1.8 million people below the poverty line. So we are giving a short-term assistance, and in the long term, in the long term, we are giving education to teens or youth that having a problem to have a real education and not to become below the poverty line.
Sure.
So we are giving 7 years program called Touching the Horizon. And also we are dealing with the government to have a practical law that giving target to the government to have more, to reduce the poverty line.
That's amazing. Okay, so, what's the Close the Loop campaign? Because I've heard a little bit about that as well.
Oh, the closest campaign?
Close the Loop, yeah.
Yeah.
With the North Face, right?
We have a relationship with North Face that giving us a clothes that we are giving to the needs, and the needs having clothes, and also we are selling this to everyone, and with the money we are giving us the money, we are buying food for the needs.
Wow. Okay. So people can donate clothing, can purchase clothing, and that money all goes towards helping the needy.
They can donate also to in our shops in Israel. They can go to our website and to go to see where they can donate clothes.
Amazing. All right. Well, Gabi, I wish the best of luck, especially with the legislation portion of your three-pronged attack at this issue. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for helping us to break the cycle of poverty.
I hope we could break it soon.
Thank you.
Israeli innovation is at it again. This time, 2 Israeli scientists have just harnessed the power of artificial intelligence to develop and test life-saving drugs, a process that usually takes millions of dollars in funds and potentially up to 15 years in medical trials. Needless to say, this is a potentially game-changing achievement. The technology was developed a few weeks ago at a conference in London where it stunned audiences with its efficiency. The system uses advanced algorithms and artificial intelligence to basically map out all the molecules in the system, of which there are sometimes billions, if not trillions, and isolate which molecules may have clinical use. The system then maps out all those molecules in a kind of biological language that essentially writes a potential medical outline for proposed treatment. And that's where artificial intelligence finally kicks in. Because unlike the 10 to 15 years it takes normally for new meds to typically clear the FDA, this process does virtually all the testing in the computer. A highly advanced formula computes all the potential molecular connections of the proposed treatment and can isolate unknown or unforeseen side effects from each. Now, it's important to note here that at some point, much of this data is still theoretical until it's tested on actual organisms. But still, the power to process and simulate thousands, if not millions, of potential outcomes at once is a staggering step forward in generating new, safe drugs at lightning-fast speeds. This technology is the brainchild of two brilliant Israelis, Shachar Harel and Dr. Kira Rudinsky. And if Dr. Rudinsky's name sounds familiar to you, there's a good reason why. She was recently appointed to a panel of the United Nations that guards the world's digital connections and cybersecurity. So needless to say, I think they have the right mind for the job. Well, the final word is finally in. Tel Aviv has been chosen as the official home of Eurovision 2019. The semifinal for the world's favorite song competition will commence on May 14th of next year, with the final showdown and the grand finale set for May 18th. So get your DVRs ready, or better still, book your flight now and fly on in for a front row seat. This announcement comes from the Eurovision organizers and broadcasters themselves and brings with it a wave of relief to Israelis. Israel first won hosting duties earlier this year when local superstar Netta Barzilai wowed the judges with her Eurovision-winning song, Toy. Barzilai has since gone on to seal international record deals, top the song charts, and grace the American stage with the United States tour. Eurovision isn't as big a deal to most Americans as it is to the rest of the world, but that's all changed now that Toy is stuck in our heads. Now, Eurovision organizers say Tel Aviv beat out both Jerusalem and Eilat for hosting duties because of its extra-large convention center. But there was some stress over Eurovision when Israel initially insisted on having the event hosted in Jerusalem too. In fact, Eurovision has been hosted in Jerusalem several times in the past with no problem. But this year, Eurovision organizers wanted a guarantee that the government wouldn't politicize the event. Eurovision's official announcement comes with a decree addressed to Prime Minister Netanyahu himself that there will be freedom of movement and security afforded to everyone involved with Eurovision, so long as the competition's values are upheld. But I think it goes without saying that at the end of the day, Israelis are just stoked to see the shindig finally return to their country. You can bet on weeks of parties and preparations before, during, and after Eurovision next May, so we'll see you there. All right, now it's time for ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh for this week's Top 5.
With the holiday of Rosh Hashanah behind us, the next big Jewish holiday in line is Yom Kippur, also known as the Day of Atonement. This day is considered to be the holiest day of the Jewish year, centering around the themes of atonement and repentance. So I'm here with the top 5 Yom Kippur traditions. First on the list is the start to the holiday, the big festive family dinner. Just like Yom Kippur is the day of fasting, the day before is set aside for eating, preparing food for the holiday. This meal is considered to be the concluding meal, getting you ready for the big fast ahead. No food or water. The Yom Kippur fast after the meal, which lasts for a 24-hour period, is meant to enable us to ignore our physical desires, focusing instead on our spiritual needs. Along with fasting, people also avoid wearing leather shoes, applying lotions or cream, and washing or bathing. So, good luck on the fast, everyone. Second up is Kol Nidre, meaning annulment of vows, which is a declaration that is recited in synagogue before the Yom Kippur. This is chanted by Jews solely on Yom Kippur and is meant to cancel and annul all unintended vows made to God during the previous year. So, this is definitely the time to think back to some of those unrealistic vows I made last year, huh? Third up is the shofar. The holiday of Yom Kippur ends with a single long blast of the shofar. The blowing of the shofar at the conclusion of Yom Kippur is the culmination of a day spent fasting and praying for a sweet new year. It's meant to symbolize the end of a long, hard fast and period of forgiveness and welcomes us into the new year. Fourth on the list of traditions is wearing all white. Traditionally, many Jews wear a white shirt on Yom Kippur due to the fact that white is a symbol of purity, and Yom Kippur is a day where we undertake a spiritual cleansing. Everyone looks clean, calm, and ready to start the new year fresh. Last but not least is the complete silence of the country. In Israel on Yom Kippur, you won't see a single car, bus, train, or any other type of vehicle on the road. All public transportation is shut down, and people roam the streets freely with no worries. Kids grab their bikes and ride down the highway with no problem, and you'll often see families filling the streets and enjoying the quiet. If you've never been to Israel on Yom Kippur, it's quite a sight to see. And with that, that's all for today's Top 5. Back to you.
Now for our Hebrew word of the day, a new HBO documentary airs today featuring the final on-screen interview of the late Israeli leader Shimon Peres. That's why today's word is re'ayon, which means an interview in Hebrew. So you probably find yourself in a re'ayon or an interview more often than you think. After all, what's a first date if not a kind of re'ayon for a potential partner? So no matter what re'ayon you find yourself in, a re'ayon for a job, a re'ayon for an apartment, just remember to take a deep breath and be yourself, because the best re'ayon is the one where everyone feels like it's a win-win. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be partly cloudy and pleasant with a low of 76 or 24 degrees Celsius. Then over the weekend, you can expect mostly clear and sunny skies with a drop in temperatures to a high of 86 or 30 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.58 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.